Dude, never did it.
Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon. My co-host is Jake Ziegler. What's up, Jake?
Well, just loving my life.
Well, that's good. Wow, so positive. I love it.
It's a nice Sunday afternoon. I love it.
That's terrific. I'm really happy to hear it. We are going to talk about some people who didn't love their life through movies in the year 1990.
Boy, are we ever.
Let's kick it off with a real bummer, and the film is Misery.
Yeah, tell me why you picked Misery for me.
Misery is the first movie that I watched with I bring up my in-laws a lot on this cast because the thing that I bond over with my father-in-law is movies. He's got an encyclopedic knowledge of Bogart's Hollywood and Gene Kelly's Hollywood and all that. But the first movie I ever watched with her family was Misery, which was an interesting choice. Now, we've watched some bummer movies. Like I made a mistake once. Last Christmas, I'm Jewish, but I celebrate Christmas with their family. That's information that you need to know. I made the mistake of, on Christmas Day, watching with them the movie When the Wind Blows. Do you know about When the Wind Blows?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
It's a 1986 British animated film about an old couple who has to survive in nuclear fallout.
Oh, God.
Spoiler alert for a movie from 1986, they slowly die throughout the movie.
Sounds awful.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie. I highly recommend it. Pretty sure it's on Tubi. Mm-hmm. Don't watch it with your in-laws on Christmas. We watched Misery on Thanksgiving. Misery is a little more upbeat than When the Wind Blows. It's adapted from a Stephen King novel. It's directed by Rob Reiner, and it stars James Caan and Kathy Bates and Lauren Bacall and Richard Farnsworth. So it was probably going to be pretty good at least. And it was. I was really blown away by it, actually. Stephen King adaptations are about as mixed of a bag as you can get. This is a great one. It's about kind of a cocky novelist who wants to go away to work on his novel, but he gets in a terrible car accident and he is abducted. Well, he's saved by a lonely woman named Kathy Bates, who's a huge fan of his. Not named Kathy Bates, played by Kathy Bates.
Annie Wilkes is the character.
Absolutely it is. She saves him, brings him back to her house, and then tortures him because he is not writing the book the way that she wants him to, / she has a very specific, and he wants to end the series. He's tired of being pinned down to this series of books. Stephen King is obviously like a little bit writing himself as the protagonist, although these are romance novels, I think, right? And King writes horror.
They're romance novels, and he literally is killing off the character, because what he does, he's got his new novel. He just finished his new novel where he kills the character off. And so he has it on him when she rescues him, and he agrees to let her read it because he says, there's this one line, I love it, it's so great. Like I said, it's funny that there's a movie with so much torture can be so upbeat, because there's a lot of like funny little lines in it where she asks him like, oh, I found this, would you do me like this great honor of letting me read your manuscript? And he's like, well, I've got a pretty hard and fast rule that I only let, my publicist, my manager, my editor, and people who saved me from life-threatening snowstorms read my work. It's like, oh, God, it's just like, it's really funny in some spots. So, like, yeah, so she gets to read it, and then she gets to the end and realizes that this character has been killed off, and she loves this character. Like, she's got shrines to this character, like, she knows everything about not only the character, but him as the author. I mean, she's all in.
Yeah, so she goes nuts, and he's at her mercy. He's badly injured from this car wreck. And it's interesting that she didn't... Do we find out that she caused the car wreck somehow?
No.
Right. So it's interesting that it happened independent of her, and these are like, whatever. It's a very like Stephen King conceit.
Sure.
The thing I love about this movie, Stephen King books often don't have interesting endings. They go really off the rails. This book is totally based in reality, and adaptations of King's books that are more based in reality are easier to adapt, I think. Like Shawshank has a real solid ending. I even think The Green Mile, which has a pretty bizarre ending, it's a solid movie.
It fits, yeah.
Yeah, but like that ending is dumb.
Yeah.
Thinner is a bad story to begin with, but that movie is trash. I've actually never seen Carrie. Is that on our list?
I don't think it is, because I've never seen it either. It's funny, my wife Megan and I were just talking about it the other day. Did you know that there's the original Carrie, of course, with Sissy Spacek, found that one. Then there's the remake with Chloe Grace Moretz did it in like the mid-aughts or whatever. There's also a Carrie in between that, and I don't have any memory of that movie existing at all, but there are 3 versions of Carrie.
Is the second one a TV movie?
It might have been, and maybe that's why it eluded me.
Yeah, that I'm not claiming that that's the case, but that feels like it's the case.
But I've actually never seen the original either, and I don't have a good excuse why.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I've seen very little De Palma in general, so that's one of my blind spots.
Yeah.
We're talking about Misery. But one of the things I love about this, yeah, so it works, but you know that like everyone can't make it out okay. And you don't need Kathy Bates' character to make it out okay. You want her to get her comeuppance. She is vile in this movie. But you do want Richard Farnsworth to make it out okay. And it was a very Stephen King move for that to not happen for him.
Yeah. He and his wife are so delightful in this movie. His wife's just like this horny old lady who just always wants to get him in the sack, and he's too busy for that. He's got policing to do, and it's just it's a treat every time the two of them are together.
I had really wished I'd watched this after I'd seen The Straight Story, because I believe The Straight Story is Farnsworth's last movie. I think he was nominated for an Oscar, and he was nominated right before he died.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
He was alive for that ceremony, but he died shortly after.
Yep.
I wonder what would have happened if he died before. I wonder if they would have given it to him
instead of who won that year? That was Spacey, American Beauty. Ugh.
But it's so funny because these characters are so different. He's so earnest and he's pretty earnest in Misery, but he's so earnest in Straight Story. And then he's a handball kind. I mean, he's not. He's like he's a detective who wants to find out what's going on. Mm-hmm. But he's, they're a comic relief, these two. So that's really fun. But what really makes this movie amazing is the dynamic between Scott Caan's dad and Kathy Bates.
That Scott Caan's dad had this in him. I mean, it's such a cool performance for a guy who was, kind of regarded, he was like a macho, one of those really strong, like male, like alpha, male type. And for him, he was so not that in this movie. He was just, like you said, at her mercy for almost the entire movie. And he was basically playing from behind the entire movie. She had the advantage the entire movie, and he's got he's crawling around. She won the Oscar, and people remember her from the movie, but damn, he is really good in it too.
Yeah, there's a scene, the scene that everyone knows from this movie, the scene that's been parodied from this movie over and over, is when she hobbles him.
Oh, which
is just a brutal scene.
Time has not weakened it at all.
No, and if you watch it with your eyes closed, the sound is enough to get you.
Yeah,
it's a real tough hang, that scene, and there's not a ton of violence in the movie outside of that. There's a lot of psychological violence, but not a lot of physical violence in the movie outside of that. There's some, but not like that. It's not a torture porn. But yeah, you mentioned that he was known for these macho alpha roles, and that's totally true. The Godfather, Rollerball, Thief, he's like impenetrable in these movies. I actually think his performance in Rollerball is a little bit underrated. I think he may have gotten panned for it a little bit at the time. It's a bit more nuanced than some of these other ones. Not to say that Sonny Corleone is not a nuanced character, but it's a bit more sensitive than the other ones. He's got a lot going on in this dystopian future. It's much better than the remake. Doesn't have Paul Heyman, but it's much better than the remake. And then I also recently watched Bottle Rocket, which he's in as a comic relief, but he plays a tough guy in that movie. Mm-hmm.
Even Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, when he plays the dad. He's a tough dad, through that entire movie.
And an elf. He's a jerk. You know what? It's a little unfair, because then you've also got the gambler.
Oh, yeah.
In the gambler, he's doing it all. And now he's playing a man with a gambling addiction, and he's headstrong, and he's like steadfast, and he's flawed, but he's got a lot. Man, that movie rules. Have you seen The Gambler?
I have not.
Goddamn, man, because it is so... Oh, of course you haven't, because I've assigned it to you for 1974.
That's right.
All right, so we'll talk about The Gambler later. I won't say too much about it. Man, he's great. So, yeah, you mentioned Kathy Bates won the Oscar. What other Oscar noise did this movie get?
None, actually. Kathy Bates was the one and only nominee here, which is... I thought was a little bit surprising. I thought maybe James Caan would have gotten in there, or maybe said something for the screenplay, because as far as like Stephen King adaptations go, this is easily one of the better ones. Really well written. It's really sharp. It's really the repartee between the two of them is really good. I mean, their chemistry together is just immediately they get. I mean, they're good together right away. Mm-hmm. And everything that they do. So a little surprising it didn't do more, but got Kathy Bates her Oscar. So I think that's a win.
This is a great excuse to talk about a phenomenon that you and I have talked about before in our regular life, but not on the show yet, which is that Best Actress nominees are often the only nominee for certain movies. And they're often movies that like you've never heard of before. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about one that's pretty recent, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which Jessica Chastain won her Oscar for, right?
Yep.
What is that movie?
It's another biopic in a long line of biopics.
Okay, and also, like, nothing else came out of that for the Oscars. Or Ana de Armas in Blonde, which is like a panned movie that she got nominated for.
It's awful.
And there's just like tons of these. Like the Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress Oscars categories are littered with nominations like this. Now, I think Kathy Bates deserved it, but it's very strange that this, and I would love to do some data digging to see if, and you're a big Oscars guy, so I'm sure you'd like this too. Maybe we'll do this as a little side project to see if there are like how many Best Actress nominees were in movies where that was the only nomination versus actors.
Yeah, we're gonna. I'm gonna get on that because I already think of a couple others. Like Julianne Moore won for Still Alice, nothing else for that movie, and that movie's great.
You don't even have to do wins. I mean, wins are interesting, but you could just do nominations. There's so many.
So many. Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do it from like a modern era to like in the last 30 or 40 years or something. Not all time would take a long time.
Let's start there. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll report back at some point in the future.
Right.
The next time, probably not till the next time this comes up on the podcast.
Right.
So I gave this 5 stars. I was totally blown away by this movie. What'd you think?
I rated it 4 stars, but the more that I've talked about it here and thought about it, I think it's more of a 4.5.
I love it. I love convincing you to go up.
Yeah, it's excellent. I mean, I don't know why I hadn't seen it before because I'm a big Oscar guy, and I don't know why I hadn't seen it. I'm glad I finally did.
Yeah, I'll never try to convince you to take it down, but I love convincing you to go up.
Yeah.
The other movie that you assigned me was Total Recall. Tell me why you wanted me to watch this movie.
Total Recall is just a ton of fun. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger at one of his best action movies from a time where he was really at the top of that food chain. It was like him and Stallone, kind of leading the way in those kind of movies. I think Total Recall is a lot of fun. I like the science fiction aspect of it. I like the outer space parts of it. I just think it's cool, and I love the villain. Michael Ironside plays the villain Richter, or one of the villains. There's a great line in it that we repeated a lot when we were younger. That because we watched this movie a lot, and yeah, it's just I think it's a really good action sci-fi movie, and another one that got remade along the line and was remade fairly poorly. So I think it's good to go back and watch the original of that one.
Kind of crazy. Before I get into what I think of this movie, Total Recall got nominated for more Oscars than Misery.
I was going to tell you that. Yeah, it got the visual effects was only like an honorary award that year. They didn't always give out visual effects back then, so you had actually won that one, and then you had 2 other nominations for sound and sound effects. So yeah, more Oscars for Total Recall than Misery.
Totally. So I was in the bag for this movie before I watched it. I'm a giant Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. I watched Running Man last year. That movie is nothing, and I still love it. Like, it's just him recycling things that he's done in other movies, better in other movies, mostly in this movie, although it came out before this movie. But that, even still, that felt way more recycled than this. This is quite well made for a schlocky sci-fi. You've got Sharon Stone looking hot as hell in this movie. Just, woo!
Yeah.
Out of control.
Yep.
I also really liked that it had Rachel Ticotin in the leading role. I mean, it's very cool and pretty uncommon that a woman of color is the female lead in a movie and the white girl is like the foil.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Sharon Stone was definitely the foil.
Not as mean as Michael Ironside, who, by the way, sci-fi all-time Hall of Fame first round pick, Michael Ironside.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's draft him in the first round.
Yeah. And I love that he's still in stuff. Like, I'm still noticing him. Like, I wasn't able to see it because the bus that we were on got detoured and I missed, and we were just not going to make it on time. But I tried to see Blackberry this weekend. He's in that.
Is he really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
He was just in that show. I forget what it was called, but it was about the Bad Blood story, The Dropout.
Oh, yeah.
He was good in that. He was in that Bob Odenkirk movie, Nobody, last year. Like, he's still making the rounds. But yeah, so he's great. I actually, because of how old I am, I first became aware of him in Starship Troopers, which he's incredible in. So funny. So he's great in this. The special effects are pretty good. I thought the Quato character was interesting, like that the MacGuffin of the movie is a living tumor.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I really liked that they created this world and left enough unmined that they could have done a sequel if they wanted to, and I respect them for not doing one.
Yeah.
Because there was this whole gimmick where people on Mars who were living in the poor parts of Mars because they were deliberately keeping oxygen from Mars. That's the conceit, and they're like mining. I don't know. The whole movie is like real estate evilness, which I really respond to. Not the evilness. I respond to that as an evil entity. All landlords are bad. I say as a guy who rents out 2 parking spaces.
Yeah.
But they have this like it's not made important, or it's not made central, but they have this conceit where the people who live on Mars under this glass who are born freaks, and then they can see the future. Everyone who's mutated is trying to hustle that they'll tell you your future, and some of them can do it better than others. It's very cool. There's a heel turn in this movie that I did not see coming. I actually gasped when the cab driver turned bad.
Oh, yeah. I just need to watch this again. I didn't get a chance to watch it again.
It's awesome. So I mentioned a second ago, there was no sequel to this, but there was an early attempt to make a sequel to this based off Minority Report.
Wow.
Luckily, that just became Minority Report.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they did remake this with Colin Farrell, which is a bummer because he's great, but he was not great in the I haven't seen the whole thing, but I have seen the part where they go through the center of the Earth and the gravity change. It's stupid.
It's bad.
But it's a very attractive cast. I love Kate Beckinsale.
Yes.
I mean, this movie just rocks. It's really funny. Arnold's great in it.
Yeah.
So at one point early in the movie, it should have tipped me off, but earlier in the movie, I'm like, why is his name Douglas Quaid? There's no way that this guy with this accent is named Douglas Quaid. And it's actually there to tip you off, because then you find out later his name is Carl Hauser, which absolutely could be his name.
Yep.
Great. It's just great. This was directed by Paul Verhoeven, so that's why Starship Troopers also directed by Paul Verhoeven. Not at all surprising that Michael Ironside is popping up all over the place. Is there anyone who makes better satirical satire than Paul Verhoeven, or ever has? Satirical sci-fi. That's what I said, right?
Gosh, between like RoboCop and Total Recall and
Starship Troopers.
Yeah, I mean, he's right up there. Yeah, he's really good. I haven't seen Hollow Man in a while. I'd be curious to see how that holds up.
I saw that at a sleepover when I was a kid, and it scared the crap out of me.
I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out, because there's another Oscar-nominated film.
Oh, is it?
For the visual effects, yeah. So that's why I saw it then, but I barely remember it.
Yeah, and then of course he made Showgirls, which sort of like ruined him for Hollywood, but that movie has sort of been reclaimed by a big piece of the film lover community. I still think it's dumb.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how that holds up too. I mean, it was garbage when I saw it, but
yeah, people love it. He also made a short film called The Wrestler, which I'm now dying to see.
Did he?
Yep.
In 1971. I've got his wiki pulled up too.
Yeah. Paul Verhoeven rules. Basically, people from Amsterdam are great. I love him. We should do a Paul just in general, like a Paul Verhoeven rewatch project at some point.
That sounds like a good idea to me.
Benedetta, I heard, was pretty good.
I've heard that as well, and then his movie before that, Elle, was excellent.
So there you go.
Yep.
Paul Verhoeven forever. Let's protect him at all costs. He's the new Betty White.
Let's do it.
I don't have much else to say about it. I'm embarrassed that I didn't see this as a fan of like 80s and 90s Arnold. I'm really embarrassed. We mentioned on the last episode, Last Action Hero, which deserves to be revisited by everyone, especially. It's just like, movies about movies tend to be fun. That movie really understood action movies. It's basically the Scream of the Arnold Stallone piece of the industry. And Charles Dance is the main villain in it, which is awesome.
Dope.
But this movie is also just rules. We have not mentioned, although it's worth mentioning, we mentioned it briefly because it won an honorary Oscar, but the visual effects in this movie are pretty wild for the time and not even that bad for now. But it's also worth giving a nod to, because you mentioned Michael Ironside as the villain, and he's really the heavy, but he's the driving force of the villain side. But Ronnie Cox is the main villain in this movie, and he's also great.
Yes. I
gave this 4 stars. I love this movie.
Yeah, I don't have a rating on my Letterboxd. It's probably because it's been so long since I've seen it, but that's my instinct too, is to give it 4 stars.
There's also, I just want to say real quick, there is a great cameo in this by an unrecognizable Dean Norris.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Dean Norris has a great cameo as Quato's bodyguard.
Oh,
but his face is covered in tumors. But I did notice. First off, you can tell by the voice. But it's a nice turn by Dean Norris too. So if you're a big Breaking Bad fan, he pops up in this too. Mm-hmm. I have nothing else to say about it. I love this movie. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's excellent. Very good.
1990 was a great year. Before we go, what movies beat these movies? I mean, Total Recall was never going to be like a critical darling in this way, but what movies won the top awards at the Oscars?
The top movie of this year was, as far as picture and director, I think, was Dances with Wolves.
I don't like that movie.
I haven't seen it in a really, really long time. I remember liking but not loving it. I'm due for a rewatch on that one.
Oh wait, sorry, I'm thinking of Last of the Mohicans, which I know I'm in the Daniel Day-Lewis is good not great territory, and I know I'm alone on this island. But Dances with Wolves I've never seen because it's 1,000,000 hours long.
Yeah, that's Costner's thing, and that won the best sound over Recall, and then Total Recall lost the sound effects editing award to The Hunt for Red October, which is also a pretty good movie. And Dick Tracy was another big one that year that won a couple of technical awards, and the best actor was actually Jeremy Irons, who we've talked about on this podcast, I believe. And then the movie that really got passed over in 1990, of course, was Goodfellas, which only won for Joe Pesci.
What movie did Jeremy Irons win for?
It's called Reversal of Fortune. I actually have not seen it.
I've never heard of it.
Because I'm not really familiar with it.
He came up recently in my podcast diet because Rachel Weisz has that remake of that Cronenberg movie he was in.
Yeah, the show, I can't remember what it's called.
Double Trouble? Something like that?
I'm pretty sure it's not that, but something like that.
Dead Ringers.
Yeah, Dead Ringers. There you go. Yep.
All right. Well, next week we'll be back with another episode. We haven't decided what year yet. See you then.